Hey everyone, it's happening. Next-gen consoles are in development, and I'd say we've got around 2 years remaining on the current generation of hardware before new machines start to appear. And yes, it really is happening. After all, we've even had Phil Spencer appear on stage at E3 2018 to talk about how the Microsoft hardware team are working on new Xbox consoles. More on that in a bit. The bottom line though, developers and publishers are being briefed behind the scenes as we speak. In fact, what I can say is that it's been going on for quite some time now. Prototype hardware, far from final I should add, has been demonstrated. Very early development kits are a thing. There's a bunch of stuff that we've heard, but based on our policy of not publishing stories without multiple sources, well, they'll have to wait for a while. But what you can expect in the meantime are leaks. Lots of leaks. Leaks from different sources, easily spottable fakes, and other, more clever but equally made up fabrications. It's safe to assume that AMD will be partnering with Sony and Microsoft again, and their roadmap is public. And again, that makes fake leaks easy to produce and reasonably plausible. But this doesn't rule out that some of the stuff that you'll be reading about is actually true. So with all of this in mind, I decided to put together this quick guide to navigating the torrent of leaks that are sure to emerge this year. So let's kick off with a really easy one. Trust your sources. Leaks can be throwaway tweets, anonymous paste bin posts, or fake leaks sent into game outlets, sometimes with surprisingly authentic looking documents. Yeah, I've kind of lost count of the amount of emails I've had which consist of photographs of very official looking documents, almost always with typos, but I digress. I've yet to see a truly credible source for PlayStation 5 leaks, but on the Microsoft side, torrent.com has done excellent work. He first revealed the Scarlet project name for the next generation Xbox, and the site's reveal of the Lockhart and Anaconda hardware is on the level, verified with my own sources. Microsoft is aware of the possibility of leaks, and it's careful with what it shares with developers and publishers. Torrent is worth following because the sources there appear to be from within Microsoft itself. And I'd also follow the work of Jez Corden at Windows Central. Shout out here to Jez, who knew what I was doing and back when I visited the Microsoft campus for the first look at the console that would go on to become Xbox One X. All I'd say about even the most reputable sources though is that sometimes information can be misinterpreted or lost in translation. Let's move on to point number 2 then. Specs can change, meaning that early leaks may be entirely accurate when they were posted, but may not remain true by the time the system comes to market. And it's not just about the hardware. Strategy can change, and of course, release dates can slip too. A few examples of this spring to mind. First of all, Xbox One launched with CPU and GPU upclocks, 1.75 GHz for the Jaguars versus 1.6 in the leaked specs, and 853 MHz on the graphics core rather than the original 800. Minor changes overall perhaps, but the point is that the leaks were entirely accurate when they were originally posted. And then of course there was the big reveal of 8 gigs of GDDR5 at the system's PlayStation meeting reveal. Right up to the point where that was announced, Sony's developer documentation talked about 4 gigs of RAM instead. Obviously that changed. Point 3, I want to go back to accurate sources for a bit. And they don't get much more authentic than the head of Xbox himself, Phil Spencer. So yeah, point 3 then. Listen very carefully to what Phil Spencer shares. Microsoft are employing a strategy of getting ahead of the leaks where they can and attempting to control the narrative. So back at E3, Phil mentioned new Xbox consoles in the plural, something he didn't have to do. And lo and behold, we have the Lockhart and Anaconda models in development. And without going into too much depth, maybe that's not the end of the story. In a Giant Bomb interview, Spencer also talked about the importance of the CPU and high frame rate gaming. I suspect those comments aren't just shooting the breeze, but relate to product objectives with Scarlet. Microsoft also loves to deliver what I call buried treasure. Let's flash back to that E3 where Xbox One X was initially revealed via a motherboard render. Microsoft could have knocked up any old nonsense there, but what we got was a look at the system's RAM configuration, confirmation of a single system on chip, and a bunch of stuff I actually overlooked at the time. So for example, it was possible to actually work out the size of the processor, about 360 square millimeters, and from that get a pretty good idea of the GPU configuration. So yeah, point 3, listen to Phil Spencer and official Microsoft messaging and stay alert for that buried treasure. Point 4 next, be careful about PC hardware comparisons. Both Sony and Microsoft are staunch partners of AMD, and yes, as I mentioned earlier, we know what AMD tends to be working on because they're fairly open with their product roadmaps. Now, we've been as guilty about this one in the past as a lot of other commentators, but hardware comparisons between PCs and consoles, and even between Sony and Microsoft consoles, often don't reflect the final experience. In fact, thinking about even PC to PC comparisons can often be inaccurate. Now, back in the day, we had the big Xbox One versus PS4 teraflop head-to-head, 1.83 versus 1.31. Pretty much a 40% boost for Sony there, often reflected in resolution and performance improvements. However, Xbox One X has a similar performance differential over PlayStation 4 Pro, and yet the resolution differential there is often a factor of 2x or higher. There's more to system potential than teraflops alone. Radeon RX 580 versus Xbox One X, pretty much 6 teraflops apiece there on the GPU, but very different levels of performance on a per title basis. On the PC side of things, AMD's Radeon 7 looks set to deliver anything up to 30% more performance than Vega 64, but it's set to do it with fewer compute units and a relatively small uplift in overall compute power. Memory bandwidth has doubled, but is this really enough to explain the big uplift in performance? We won't know until we review it, but bottom line, hardware comparisons, they're becoming less reliable, less relevant. Point 5 next, patents, often used in leaks. I'm not going to dwell for too long on this one, but suffice to say, patents can reveal some of the thinking of gaming engineers and some of the ideas that might be in gestation. But it's often the case that it's just, about ideas that developers and publishers want to protect, and only a very small minority translate into actual products. What I will say though is that there's a ton of work being done on streaming technologies, as you might expect, particularly in terms of lowering latency beyond anything we've seen so far. And yes, that work is being patented. More on that soon. Point 6, and this is a big one, secret source. Oh man, this is awesome. Secret source is best described as custom hardware modifications designed to deliver some kind of hardware accelerated feature that will improve the gaming experience. Back in the day, secret source was mooted as a reason why Xbox One could compete on a technical level against a rival console with a much more capable GPU. There were even unrelated crazy rumors about a second GPU within the Xbox One that would be activated on retail hardware. I think my favorite example of fake secret source would be dual layer ESRAM, but I digress. The basic idea of secret source is entirely sound, and custom hardware features in a console is nothing new. Perhaps the greatest example I can muster is the custom checkerboarding hardware in the PlayStation 4 Pro and the ID buffer. This was specific, targeted components integrated at the silicon level to make 4K output more viable from a 4.2 teraflop GPU. And to be fair, it has helped to deliver some great results. But at the same time, plenty of excellent upscaling solutions have emerged that don't actually use this hardware. Regardless though, when we discussed PS4 Pro leaks back in the day, we saw a tiny bit of documentation surrounding checkerboarding, but what we didn't see was just how good the results could be. When I actually saw Pro titles running at the reveal event, I realized that, hey, innovative hardware engineering can make a big difference, and I expect lessons learned here to be deployed on next-gen console hardware. Okay, I'm going to end with a couple of cautionary notes about next-gen hardware leaks. Lessons learned from the past, if you will. which we completely ignore for the most part whenever a new leaked spec appears. Point 7 then, remember the target price point. Back in 2006, Sony delivered PlayStation 3, a console that was super advanced for its time and with a massive build cost. Sony announced a colossal $600 price point for a 60GB PlayStation 3, and it proved to be a massive mistake, one the company put right in 2013 with PS4 priced at the much more reasonable $400 and cheaper than the less capable Xbox One. Whenever spec leaks appear, consider how much it would cost to actually build that thing. Also think about the amount of heat it's likely to generate and whether it's viable in a console form factor. But the bottom line is that the best of the best costs a lot of money, and that's not what consoles are about. Essentially, what they're aiming to deliver there is the best balance of price and performance, and then just basically letting developers get on with their jobs. And generally speaking, the results work out. Consider the PlayStation 4. It's essentially a Radeon 7850 paired with a couple of mobile CPU clusters, and yet it's delivered some simply incredible results. And that kind of leads me on to my final point about spec leaks. Prepare for disappointment, and some surprises too. It's only really since Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 that specs and specs leaks have come under the microscope, but pretty much every console that has launched has been accompanied by some kind of terrible and profound disappointment. Xbox 360? No HDMI to begin with, no Blu-ray drive, no mandatory hard drive, the list goes on. PlayStation 3? GPU really wasn't that great. Nintendo Wii? It's an overclocked GameCube. Wii U? CPU was terrible, and early rumours of high-end Radeon GPU hardware turned out to be nonsense. Current gen machines, CPU and even GPU don't compare favourably to the PCs of the time. Switch, remember when I revealed the CPU and GPU clocks? People couldn't believe it, there was shock and horror, but it was true. Some of these disappointments are regrettable, of course. Switch would be better, though not game-changingly better, if it used Tegra X2 and not Tegra X1. The current console generation could have been a lot different if AMD had something better than Jaguar to offer. But the point is that developers work with what they're given and generally get some superb results. Will there be some kind of profound spec disappointment with the next-gen machines? Almost certainly, and seriously, prepare for the inevitable. There are always shocks. But equally, let's remember that leaked specs and associated speculation can also be trumped by the final product, by the innovation in that final product, and we've seen plenty of examples of that. So for example, when I first saw Horizon, Rise of the Tomb Raider and Days Gone running on PlayStation 4 Pro at the console's reveal, I was genuinely blown away by the results. A 4 teraflop GPU shouldn't be capable of producing presentations that looked that good. Xbox One X? Microsoft delivered a 6 teraflop monster in a form factor that turned out to be the smallest Xbox it had ever made, with whisper-quiet acoustics. We were skeptical about its 4K credentials too, but overall I'd say that there have been more hits than misses, culminating in a stunning native Ultra HD presentation for Red Dead Redemption 2, pretty much the most technically advanced game of this console generation, certainly from a multi-platform perspective. So there you go, my guide to navigating the murky world of next-gen console leaks. Some are real, some are subject to distortion via Chinese whispers or whatever, but some are real, and I'll do my best to navigate you through them over the coming months as and when they appear. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video, if indeed you did. And yes, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the bell for instant notifications if you have. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching.